to McCall College's Community Conversation on YouTube. McCall College offers specialty higher education to all ages in the West Central Mountains. Our main focus for our community conversations is pandemic-related mental health concerns. Our series goal is to offer education in mental health problems in our area, to offer strategies for coping with mental health problems, and to share local and regional resources for help. We are pleased to welcome to our second week, Counsellor Katy Stoll. Katy, welcome. You've taken on a challenging title, Resetting Relationships Back to Normal, Coping with Pandemic Struggles. Thank you for taking that particular journey with us. Can you give us a bit of your background?
Absolutely. So I have been a psychotherapist for 22 years. I have a background in working with adolescents for about the first 9 years of that. I have worked in private practice, both in California and here in McCall. And I've worked with severely mentally ill people. I've done group, individual, family, couples counseling.
Very good.
The whole gamut.
How long have you been in practice? Did I miss that?
About 22 years.
Oh.
Yep.
Thank you. That's a wonderful panoply of experiences that I think will be really helpful for us tonight.
Okay.
What motivated you to work in counseling itself?
So I was one of those young adults that had a hard time figuring out what my journey was. And I had a couple of really wonderful professional jobs out of college that were very empty to me. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about what was it that I enjoyed about those things? What did I want out of my work? And what I came up with was what I liked the most was the interacting with other people, whether we were talking about a political event they were planning or talking about a media buy that I was trying to make. I like talking to the people. I also realized that I needed my work to feel meaningful to me. It did not matter to me whether an ad started on time or didn't, because I thought, well, what's the difference? Who's affected by that? So I needed to have meaningful work as well.
Have you found it?
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
And it's you pointing to the diversity of my experience. That's been another benefit, that I can just keep learning and growing and finding new populations of people to work with.
That's so important.
Yeah.
I'm glad you have discovered that. What areas of counseling do you work in?
So currently I am working almost exclusively with adults. And I do a lot of work in depression, anxiety. I've taken on a lot of work in trauma, both big traumas and smaller traumas, addiction, and couples counseling.
Why? That seems broad, but when you think about our community, I think our counselors of necessity have to broaden their practice
Sure.
to try and serve the people that need help.
Yeah.
Is that a fair statement for a small
Absolutely.
community?
And I think even all of our healthcare professionals are called on to kind of be broad in that way. Absolutely.
Yeah, that certainly happens. We're sitting in the midst of a pandemic, and the pandemic has certainly had influence in our region to each of us. And I'm wondering how the pandemic has changed mental health in our region from your perspective.
So in thinking about this question, I think there's two phases. We had our acute phase right at the beginning. I think myself and a lot of colleagues, especially the colleagues I work with the substance treatment, noticed that a lot of our really vulnerable clients were relapsing very seriously, very dramatically. And that was what was noted first, that people who already were symptomatic in one way or another, those symptoms rose, a lot more anxiety, that kind of thing. But as this became more of a chronic stressor, I feel like I've seen it across the board. Everybody's having their own unique difficulties in coping with the restrictions that they're having. personal stress levels are high. I think interpersonal stress levels are much higher.
How has the pandemic changed your own practice? And so you're broad in serving an awful lot of people.
Yeah.
Has that altered? Have you narrowed? Have you expanded? How has your practice changed?
Well, in terms of the work, there have been themes that seem to come up. Working with people who are reverting back to maladaptive coping, negative coping. I know we're going to talk about that later.
Thank you.
Very serious relationship problems, spike in domestic violence referrals. But some good things that have happened is now we all know how to use telehealth, and we all do it pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's become a really viable solution for people to get care that previously was not very realistic for them to get. Folks out in Reagan's don't really want to drive every week out to McCall to have a therapy appointment.
Sure.
And now we can just connect on Zoom or whatever platform and work away.
Did you do telehealth prior to the pandemic, or is this sort of a new feature?
For me, it's brand new. I didn't even like to Skype with my family across the country just because I was very uncomfortable with the whole format. But it was one of those things that, 1 week we're in the office, the next week we better be online.
Yeah. And there's an anxiety for you, I'm sure, as sort of a newbie to this form of communication.
Yes.
Probably you had to work through. Is that a fair?
I had some concerns about how some of my techniques were going to translate. And fortunately, I got some great consultation and they work brilliantly. And it's delightful.
Yeah.
It really is.
We are
to feel
all learning.
Confident that you can provide good services on the internet.
We are all learning, aren't we?
Yes.
I'm appreciative of you coming and helping us with relationships. In my family, relationships have become strained at all levels, whether it's interpersonal, whether it's with siblings, whether it's with parents, the broader social orbits that I experience. I can see a strain in all of them. So thank you for taking on this really, really important topic. Where are you seeing the most dramatic relational stress?
Well, I think the crucible of the family is really where it's at. And I think I spent a little time thinking about, well, why is that? You've got adults trying to manage work in a situation which may be restricted or limited, not ideal, or may to them feel unsafe. I imagine there are still people who do not feel comfortable in their work environment and some of the positions that they've been put into. I know public-facing people have actually experienced a lot of abuse at work in this past year from a lot of visitors. And then in these families, you have kids at various, developmental stages having their own responses to the situation, the loss of connection with their friends, even going back to school. I'm aware that, kids mostly just socialize with the kids who are on the same day as they are. So there's a loss of friend groups, there's a loss of activities. And then you have these satellite type relationships with people who don't live in your family, but are part of your family, your friend groups, who may have different perceptions of safety and risk. Been hearing a lot about that frustration. Families who, for example, have a family member that needs to be protected from COVID, feeling like my parents or my neighbors don't respect that. That's causing conflict.
Boy, you're really seeing it. And from my world, dealing with the public for almost a daily basis, that stress was aggravated by national stressors. When there was a shooting somewhere else that is reasonably similar to my environment, there was a stress that was coming out of that really it came out of left field for me, where all of a sudden now I was worried about my own situation in ways that I hadn't been because of national level stress levels. And I think that's what I've sensed is we've we've had more national input that has created stress. And
Yeah.
has been an intriguing analysis for me. Have you seen that, or am I modestly unique in that one?
I think I would say yes, because I do, people come into my office and sort of offload about the current events,
Yeah.
be they health related, be they political related, be they these kinds of national tragedies that we've witnessed along with this COVID that we've had. And people kind of feel the need to get that off their chest. One of the other pieces of it, though, is a lot of people are discovering that people in their network don't feel the same way about these things as they do.
Mhm.
That has caused a lot of stress in relationships.
And so the network is a source of our strategies. And so that's been fragmented.
Yeah,
As you go into
Yeah.
your network to say, how have you dealt with this?
yeah,
There's barriers now
Yeah.
that you recognize they think differently in the COVID-19 area.
and people not treating each other respectfully around that, I think, is the biggest problem. People have always had different ideas, but people are attacking each other now.
Oh my. And that's clearly national, clearly now local is your experience.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I'd like to sort of dive into this word coping now. And you've already used it as negative coping. I'd like to use it in the sense of positive coping first. How have families been coping with relational stress?
So again, in this phase type model, what I noticed a lot of people, and again, there's sort of a strata in our community. There are people who could do this. There are people who absolutely couldn't. But I was aware of a lot of families who would take advantage of the fact that things were closed. We're all pretty outdoorsy people anyway. So they would, take extra camping trips and just sort of not worry about doing school a couple of days and, really enjoying those kinds of things. Unfortunately, a lot of other people still had to work, we really had sort of a business as usual mindset. I think that's an American mindset. Just power through, get it done. Doesn't matter how you feel, just do it. So a little bit of difference in that. I think a lot of people maybe thought this isn't going to be that long. We'll get through this.
Yes.
And I think as it wore on, it became a different kind of stressor when we all did have to really get back to work, when the kids needed more school than what they were getting through the computer screen.
And where are those resources? Yeah, if you need those kinds of things. Now help us to understand negative coping and what that means and what experiences you've seen in the family relational structure when it comes to negative coping.
Yeah, so, we all have a range of positive and negative coping as individuals. Positive copings can be things like hobbies and playing musical instruments and personal attributes such as being persistent or resilient or having the ability to see both the positive and the negative. When in the counseling world, when we're talking about negative or maladaptive coping, we're talking about a lot of behaviors that have a short-term payoff. They make us feel better somehow. They numb us out. They bring us up when we need to be up. They push us down when we need to be down, but they're not overall very healthy for us. For example, how many people do you know talked about putting on COVID weight?
Yes.
Eating too much. And I'm not necessarily talking about disordered eating. I was talking about stress eating. That's a rather innocuous version of negative coping. So in my practice, I'm seeing people coming in talking about their own, for example, increase in alcohol consumption, or somebody that they care about, their increase in alcohol or drugs. We can also sometimes see anxiety as being a way of coping. Doesn't sound like a coping skill, but when we are hyper aware of danger, it's protective. And some people find themselves getting into that where it's very hard to let go of that. It's hard to experience anything but danger.
in the moral world, sometimes we see things that are positive when utilized modestly become negative when pushed.
Sure.
Is that same problem illustrate a part of the negative coping when people overdo something now that they're in a higher stressor environment?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And it was positive in their life.
Sure,
for
and
a long
there
time,
can
and
be, many people can, for example, drink very moderately or recognize that they enjoy shopping and maybe treat themselves every once in a while. And some people can't.
Oh, it's such a challenging area. Oh, my word. Thank you. And now we live in a resort community where the stressor, we're just arriving now at Memorial Day weekend. And that's the beginning of the hyper stress for our community, because all of your service people are now going into overdrive. And for most of us, because there's not enough help, in any field, those that are in the service community are now moving into an awful lot of work, but with very little support in so many ways, because they don't have enough colleagues to share the work. So being in a resort community is different, and in my sense, it's a higher stress level that I have experienced in other places.
Sure.
How, from your experience, how has the resort environment created greater problems in our relationships?
I think you're right. I think it's in a layer of stress. I think pandemic intensified that because, as we all are well aware, we were invaded immediately. People fled to their second homes or sold their home and purchased one here. And I think at first it was a little off-putting and disorienting to people. I remember some news items about people kind of calling out cars from different states and that sort of thing, a little bit of hostility in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
But then what I think we transferred into the realization that our businesses needed to be open. They weren't going to make it if they stayed closed for months and months. And realistically, people got back to work. Then we deal with this idea of providing a high level of services, high demand, always chronically understaffed, right? All of these businesses are chronically understaffed. So the people who are trying their best to work hard are feeling that pressure. They're feeling more pressure from, people on vacation who maybe think they took a vacation from COVID, that they should have kind of different rules here than they do at home. I've heard from many friends that we have who work in public facing jobs, just some very difficult, and I've watched people dealing with difficult customers. And I think you bring that home.
Yes.
And how do you deal with that if, for example, your favorite summer activities have been canceled?
Mm-hmm.
This community loves live music. I had no idea how much. I love it. I didn't think it was just me, but I can't tell you how many people told me how sad they were about different things like that being canceled. Because that was the sort of thing that you look forward to, and in the dead of February, you think, oh, well, it'll be so nice to be whatever up on the lawn at Brundage listening to music or out at Roseberry, whatever. And we lost a lot of those things. And I think it was hard to continue to provide service to people on vacation when we're feeling like our resources are really gone.
Excellent. No, that's so important. The other factor of COVID was the enforced isolation.
Yeah.
I think we live in a community of hermits. In fact, I think that's almost a characteristic of a vast majority. And we sense that whenever Winter Carnival comes up and nobody locally is standing on the street. They're hermits when it comes to people in our community. But the isolation of COVID was different.
Yeah.
And so how has that isolation negatively impacted our mental health?
So isolation and shame, to me, are the mental health killers. They increase every symptom exponentially. So I know that isolation, for example, increases dementia. The very people that we were most wanting to protect, we may have inadvertently hurt as well. There was a balance there, I guess. It just really, it intensifies sense of depression and anxiety, loneliness. Then we start creeping into those negative behaviors I talked about, and not even necessarily these things that we might classically look at as addiction, but maybe just not getting enough sleep. A lot of us turn in the wrong direction when we're under stress. We eat the wrong foods, or we stop exercising because we're too tired, or we stay up too late streaming shows that we can't even remember 2 weeks later. A lot of that kind of thing, slowly eroding our mental health.
You put your finger on an equation that I think we really have to think about, and that's isolation and dementia. And I'm just trying to process the reality of that with my own parents,
Sure.
now my own mother, and the challenge of that. So I'm just processing your comment into my own life as to how isolation may have affected me or those around me. So it's you've put an interesting equation in for us to sort of do a checklist on how are we doing.
And honestly, I think we have to monitor that for ourselves here all the time, because we do really retreat in the winter.
Sure.
So the shoulder season is when everybody starts coming into counseling. Oh, I'm not going to make it this year. You'll make it this year.
You touched on shame, on isolation, but you made a reference to shame.
I could not say it.
do you sort of want to build that? Has that been a feature?
Well,
that has grown?
They feed off of each other.
Okay.
When you don't talk about what your it is, you feel like you're the only one that has this. You're the only one suffering. You're the only one that does this thing that part of you knows is horrible. Other part of you won't stop doing it. And it just reinforces. You get in these, in addiction, we talk about shame spirals.
Sure.
And you just end up sinking and sinking and sinking. And that's why these peer support groups are so wonderful. One of the many reasons is you're together with a bunch of people who say, hey, guess what? I got the same problem as you do.
Wonderful. Valuable. Have the symptoms of COVID-19, such as brain fog, and many folks, our previous conversation series was on vaccine hesitancy, and we had a wonderful conversation with 5 folks that had experienced COVID. And almost universally, they talked about brain fog.
Sure.
And it seemed to have lasted for more than a week or two. It seemed to have
Absolutely.
some length to it.
Yeah.
So how have you experienced brain fog in your journey in your world, and how has or might it connect with our mental health?
Well, so the people that I've worked with who have had COVID, who have talked about that, it does seem to be a transient symptom. I do agree that it lasts more than a couple of weeks. It's definitely longer than the fever and so forth if you had those symptoms. Apart from that, I'm aware sort of news reports of people having more longer term symptoms like that. I feel like that is probably not a mental health issue. It's more of a medical issue, neurological kind of thing. However, whenever there's a loss of functioning that seems like it might be more permanent, there's always a response to that. A loss of sense of self-concept, a loss of competency sometimes, especially with our brains. Losing your smell for a while, not so fun.
Yeah.
But losing your ability to think clearly and remember things can be very disturbing. I have, however, noticed a lot of people telling me, They have brain fog regardless of having COVID or not. And I think that is a symptom of the stress that we're all under. I had a good friend last week tell me, I feel like I can't deal with one more thing for a year.
Oh, and the stress.
And some of the symptoms that you might see around that would just be kind of shutting down and giving up. You know, your kid brings home the F on the test, which many parents have experienced, and you look at it for the third time this year and go, I can't care anymore. That's a sign that the stress, the trauma of that is starting to get to you. That is a way of coping. That's a negative coping because we don't want to shut down all the time. But sometimes that's what our brain goes to.
Thank you for helping us understand the problem in a limited format and for our conversation tonight. And I appreciate that. I'd like to take you now into some of the treatments that might be helpful and that counselors are particularly attuned to assess and assist.
Yeah.
What strategies do you use in assisting in the minimization of the various issues we've been talking about tonight?
Yeah, so what I wanted to do is maybe just approach this question from the relational component. From the individual component, we can go a million directions. So you want to, number one, so the first thing I wrote was reduce maladaptive coping or acting out, but that's actually not the first thing. The first thing, when you get the family or the couple usually, what you want to do is you want to let the person who is doing the acting out behavior know that they're not a horrible human being, that they're not going to be, you know, treated as you're the problem. This person is not the problem. Stop making life hard for this wonderful person over here. But that there is a quality of this behavior that is helping him or her deal with something. And are they open to figuring out, number one, what that is? Number two, if there's other ways of doing that, and sort of calming down that blaming. You can't work with people if they're feeling defensive and like they're getting scapegoated for all the problems. So that is actually number one. Then you try to reduce this maladaptive behavior, and then you really want to work on improving honest, direct, intimate communication. Probably every married couple has had moments, maybe decades, of real difficulty feeling like they're still connected in that way they might have been when they first met or at different wonderful times in the lifespan. So trying to get back to that a little bit, or maybe even improve on it in a more mature way.
What coping techniques do you find work for people? There's a whole range of them, and I'm sure you've had this toolkit that probably has been adjusting all the way through these 22 years of clinical practice.
Sure.
And so which ones really sort of work for you?
So the funny thing about tools, my clients who are paying attention know that Katy's not a fan of the word tool. And I'll tell you why. Okay. Because these things work and they're wonderful, but people don't use them. They want to come in, they want the tools, they'll do it for a little while, they'll put them down, and then things kind of go back to the way they were. Because a lot of tools, if they're used sporadically, are just about symptom management. That being said, some of them, when you integrate it into your life, can change your life. So I made my little list. I'm going to look down a little bit. Lifestyle changes, exercise, socializing within your realm of comfort. You know, some of us, as you said, are more introverted. Some of us are more extroverted. So there's no like formula, but don't fool yourself into thinking you don't need people because you do. Sleep, big lifestyle changes. Then you pay attention to your consumption of alcohol, tobacco, drugs, caffeine. Those are kinds of things you pay attention to. Intentional relaxation can be really helpful. Meditation is fantastic. However, it's intimidating to a lot of people, and I think you have to commit to it because the Western mind doesn't take to it naturally. I use a lot of guided relaxation because it's a lot easier for people to focus their mind on that. And I encourage people to practice that at home. You tune into your self-talk, what you tell yourself in your brain about yourself, and you try to make it more positive. Realistic, but positive. And then focusing on things like, sometimes I will ask people to just do like a gratitude journal, bullet points. So takes maybe 45 seconds. Just sit down at the end of the day and 5 things. You are not allowed to repeat the same things every single day.
Okay.
Things that really make kind of your heart sing when you think about it.
And the title is cueing me on what you're trying to achieve, I think. And gratitude for what has happened to you today. Is that what you're trying to achieve?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. And there is a correlation between being a grateful person and being a happy person.
Very nice. And that gratefulness, you're just elevating the happiness at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And seeing the result of that.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure has benefits in sleep and waking up in better shape the next day.
Absolutely.
Very nice. Very nice tool.
And so then with
Oh,
individuals.
it's not a tool. What can I say?
You can say it's a tool. It is a tool. I don't mind the tools as
Okay.
long as we, recognize that's level 1.
Yeah.
And another thing I like to do is just talk with people about what things they already have that they might have put aside. Again, like hobbies, and I mean, people around here are fantastically interesting. They know a lot of things about a lot of different things. There's really wonderful, diverse people around here, and I love that. And then also pointing out to people that they have personal characteristics that are automatically good coping. People who are persistent, for example, people who have certain kinds of resilience, people who are really good at solving problems in their lives. These are qualities that we can bring in to apply to whatever the problem they're bringing to me.
Very, very helpful. Thank you. Many seem to assume that counselors only use coping strategies and the tools in the toolkit in their practice. Are there practices that you can help cure us of some of these struggles? And that's a loaded word,
Yes.
and I'm going to use it anyway and let you sort of be challenged by that word,
Sure.
because it does have a load to it, to a counselor.
Absolutely. And I do use it with my clients to avoid the word sustained remission, which sounds like maybe you don't want that, but it's basically the same thing. It's like, okay, for so many years of my life, I used to experience this, and now I don't anymore. Interesting. So what we want to do is get at some of the underlying patterns or experiences that are pushing these symptoms and not allowing us to apply good coping skills and our common sense and our support network to really alleviate that. 2 different treatments I like to use for most of my career did cognitive behavioral therapy. I thought I was going to be a depth psychologist because that's me.
Okay.
And then I will start working with people and realize, oh, they don't want that nonsense. They just want to feel better. So I zigged instead of zagged. And cognitive behavioral therapy is a well-tested, well-demonstrated group of techniques that basically sit on the foundation that the problem is not our feelings, not our symptoms, not our mood. It's not the depression, it's not the anxiety, it's not the anger. It's what we're telling ourselves in our head about the situations in our lives that are creating those feelings. So if you can change the thoughts, you can change the feelings. If you change your feelings, you can change your behavior. It's pretty powerful. And for clients who come in and practice it consistently, they can get what you might call a cure. Absolutely. However, it does require a lot of practice. So in the past several years, I've become trained in a technique called EMDR, eye movement, desensitization, reprocessing.
Okay.
Terrible name.
Okay, walk us through it.
So that is based on the premise that certain adverse experiences can be a trauma, something that we would all agree would be a trauma, or can just be a negative, like a chronic negative experience, are complex enough and hit us at times in our lives where we are not able to process, the brain literally cannot process that memory out adequately. And the example that I often offer it to people is, they'll tell me about an experience that it feels like it's happening all the time. So, well, you've had other bad experiences in your life, right? Oh, absolutely. Said, well, when you think about those, what comes up? Well, not very much. I mean, I remember it happened. That's normal. That's healthy. So what we want to do with this technique is make all of these other experiences, these traumas, these sometimes awful things that happened, maybe just, sometimes it's just we're a real sensitive child and our environment didn't respect that. So we internalized a lot of thoughts and feelings about ourselves that just aren't true. But our minds were so immature that we didn't know what to do with that. So with this technique, we can work all that through. And I've seen remarkable things for people. I'm always excited when somebody's willing to try it because I just can't wait to see what happens at the other end of it.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I've realized I've missed a question. So this one's coming out. But I think you'll handle it wonderfully well. And it's because of who I am. I have never been to a counselor. Therefore, I have no idea what would happen on day one.
Okay.
I have no idea. And so for me to even think of picking up the phone
Sure.
and making an appointment with a counselor, I enter into this fog that I have no idea what might happen. Therefore, the barrier between me and a counselor is right now pretty high.
Sure.
Because of that unknown factor. So let's go back. And so for someone that has never had an experience of a counselor, me, what would you tell me to sort of bring this barrier down so that becomes a part of how I can find help for areas that I need help?
Sure. So as from the position of just how to think about that as a person,
Sure.
Picking up that phone.
Yeah.
Honestly, I would say just give it a try. I have this little summary that I wrote about, but one of the things is just don't worry that you don't know how to package yourself and say very eloquently what your problem is and where it came from. And, don't even worry if you're not a talker. I can't tell you how many men, sorry for stereotyping, but that's been my experience in our community, will say, I'm not a big talker. It's okay. It's absolutely okay. That's my job, to help create an environment that facilitates whatever somebody needs to do. And if it needs to be very slow, very safe and gentle about, let's just figure out what you want to do with this time, what you might be curious about, what you might be worried about, even talking about the process itself. What are you concerned that I might do or think or say?
Excellent.
It's all on the table.
So now I'm past the phone. I've made the appointment. I've walked in the door.
Sure.
What's going to happen and how long? I mean, what does that experience feel like for that first session with you?
So unfortunately, because we're a medical field, there is paperwork involved.
Okay.
And I try to minimize the impact of that. Just kind of any questions, kind of talk about some of the parameters of our work together. And then I say, I do need to get a little background, but I want to hear from you first. How are you feeling about this? If I know from being on the phone that they've never been in before. I've heard some really interesting stories about people who've had bad counseling experiences. Those things need to be talked about immediately. I've heard some shocking things, but they have to get out there because that's in the back of that person's mind at all times. There's a barrier right there.
Sure.
let alone not knowing what's going to happen. But yeah, I think orienting to, we're going to talk a little bit about what you think. I'm going to get some background. Some of it may not seem relevant. Some of it may be. Some of it may actually come into play later. It might be. And some of it, depending on your insurance, I just have to have this notated in the chart. So again, apologize for that. And then we just start talking about different things. And if someone seems a little uncomfortable, you know, we talk about strengths. What do you do well? What are you proud of? It's to create some kind of sense that, okay, this isn't going to be awful. This isn't going to be painful.
Very good. Thank you. This is.
And a wonderful graduate instructor told this whole class that the goal of the first session for the therapist is to instill hope.
Very nice.
So
and if you can,
that's my goal.
Give that as your gift. You have given people something that's very, very valuable. That's wonderful. One of the points in your title is you wanted to deal with that word normal. And for all of us, normal has become very weird. And we're all hoping to return to normal. But I think the wisest path might be to find a new normal. How do we help people find the normal that's probably a new normal in their lives to help them transition? And we're still in the middle of this.
Right.
But
right.
What's the word normal mean to you? And what are you sensing new normal might mean to the hope of other people?
That's a lot. So I guess when I was thinking about this originally, I was kind of in my personal stance, and a lot of people's person, I just want to get back to life as it was before. Mm-hmm. And part of that, from my perspective, from mental health, is we do need our lives to start opening up again. We need to be able to do the things that we love to do, be around the people that we want to be around, enjoy those kinds of experiences, and not have them be so fraught with anxiety or with concern about, you know, who's thinking what, or worrying about what other people are doing so much. I think part of what we need to do is just respect everybody's process around getting comfortable. I mean, today we had this announcement from the CDC that if you are vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask anymore. Mm-hmm. Some people are going to be elated. A lot of people are going to be elated, but there will be people who will not. There will be people who will take time to transition away from that. There will be people who may not really ever want to do that. I don't know. I think we have to be kinder to each other, more respectful to each other, not publicly shaming people for doing what they need to do to just feel safe going about their daily life.
That will be a new normal.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. I'm not sure how much around here. We'll see. Yeah. I think there will be places where it will be very customary.
When you look around the world, you see cultures that are perfectly comfortable in wearing a mask.
Sure.
And that their social milieu gives them that comfort.
Yeah.
You see, in our setting before the pandemic, we were very uncomfortable at wearing a mask, and those that did, there was a sense of what illness do they have, and how might we avoid them?
Right.
And there's almost an avoidance that the mask created in our culture. So it truly will be interesting if the new normal, when it comes to the mask and how we interrelate, whether that will be a useful tool in our toolkit into the future now.
And I do. I think that is the symbol too. The mask will be the symbol. Yes. All the other things can probably fall away without much notice, but this is so important. The face is so important.
And for those of us that have been able to shed the masks on experience, the comments I'm getting is wonderful to see people smiling. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a stress reduction tool.
I agree.
Is when you see someone that you're in a conversation with smiling, mm-hmm. somehow things ooze away. And we've been losing the smiles for a long time.
Yep.
And so thank you. How do you help those that have failed in the treatments you've attempted? And again, a loaded question, but I think it's so important because you've already referenced people who other counselors have failed them. And I'm sure in your journey, you've struggled with some of your clients. How do you deal with failure, either of another counselor and you're trying to infill, or yourself and you realize something's gone wrong?
Right.
So how do you deal with failure?
So it's really important to talk about that experience, to find out what was not working about it. Was it inappropriate behavior on the side of a counselor? I don't hear about that too often. I've heard about it a few times in my career, but it's more often a mismatch of whatever intervention to where that person was at that time in their life. It just wasn't a good connection. Sometimes it's an interpersonal thing. Some people, I think, have a more difficult time connecting, and you need to find a counselor who's really going to be able to make you feel comfortable and to be able to bring that out. Other people don't have any problem at all with that. But another piece is to sort of identify, does that person have some kind of resistance? And in counseling, when we talk about that, we're not necessarily talking about, I mean, sometimes we're aware of it. So you talk about ambivalence with your client. So part of you wants to be here, tell me about the part that doesn't. Always talk with people struggling with addiction about that, because there's definitely a big part of them, probably several parts of them, that do not want to be in that chair. And if you don't get that part as an ally, you're not gonna get
So someone
anywhere.
has forced them into the chair.
Not necessarily.
Oh, okay.
We have these conflicts within our own selves.
Okay.
I can't tell you how many times, well, I know better, but I don't know why I do this. Well,
There
let's
we
find
go.
out.
Yeah,
Let's find out what this part of you wants us to know about that. So to figure out where that piece is, because that, I think, quite often is what interferes with treatment success, is that there's been a failure to recognize and deal with resistance effectively. And it is very difficult. I'm not saying anything negative about any of my colleagues anywhere in the world at any level of practice. It's very difficult to know how to work with. And then you just try something else. If they said, I had 6 years of cognitive behavioral therapy and it didn't work, don't go there again. Just don't.
Very good. Very good. Thank you for working us through the treatments that you have at your disposal. And we're very thankful that they often work. And isn't that wonderful?
It is wonderful.
When we get a chance to nudge people in a new or productive direction that their life could benefit from. Let's talk about the resources that you use, because again, you're going to encounter things that are beyond what you can help people with.
Absolutely.
And so we need to have resources around us that are useful. What local help is available for the struggles that you're now encountering or your patients are encountering that someone else could help?
Sure. So people are often surprised at the number of counselors that we have available. I just want to indicate that if anybody is concerned about that, there are a lot of counselors available in Valley County, services out to other counties. So there's that. We have visiting prescribers, and we have a very well-respected substance program here in McCall. We have a lot of peer support groups that are very well regarded and well received, and the people who participate in that always tell me they're fantastic. Talking about AA, I'm talking about Al-Anon, our new Rock Center. People are really excited about that. That's filling a gap that we needed. And groups at churches can provide tremendous support. I know there are churches that have men's groups and women's groups, and they're not necessarily all, for example, Bible studies, which are wonderful in and of themselves, but just the sort of fellowship groups are wonderful. I think that's about it.
That's a good start. And I had that experience today as I was looking for a colleague and wanting to speak with them. And I walked up to the behavioral science offices over in Dinehart, and I couldn't believe the number of names on the board.
Sure.
I had no idea that they
Yeah.
were available.
Right.
And so I had that experience today of realizing there's a lot of resources in
Yeah.
the people that want to help. And
Yeah.
so it was a moment for me.
And there's a variety of specialties and disciplines. I mean, we have a clinician that is very well versed in eating disorders. There are a number of us who do EMDR, so we can work with trauma. We have an art therapist in town.
Mhm.
Fantastic.
Wonderful. So what regional or national agencies would you want people to be aware of that we could highlight tonight?
So that was a sticky one for me. I want people to be aware of the suicide hotline.
Excellent.
Very important. And the fact that they do texting, which is critical for probably everyone under 30. They would strongly prefer to text, and they do have a number where they will text and they respond to texts.
And would that be a separate number from the national hotline? I mean, would you need to find a specific number for that?
I think these are our state hotlines,
Okay.
and one of the numbers is talk or text.
Last week, we had a good conversation on suicide prevention.
Sure.
And so Christina gave us some of those numbers
Yeah.
and some of those resources.
And it just needs to be emphasized over and over again, because that is
Agreed.
a very serious issue that we never in this profession take for granted. There is no, oh, it's just a cry for help. That is not a concept that we deal with.
Thank you.
There is it's a state agency called BPA. I'm not sure what that stands for, but they have a lot of funding resources, especially for folks struggling with substance misuse. And the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill is a resource that I would love to see expand in our area, but there is a lot of information online that people can access, both for themselves and if they have a loved one who has a serious diagnosis.
Important. Thank you. So there's times when the financial resources are not available. And so that can be a barrier for people seeking help and wondering, how much is this going to cost me if I go and find help
Yeah.
somewhere else? Everyone in your field are well trained. They've had lots of opportunities. But for those with no financial resources for professional mental health, what do you suggest?
Well, there are a couple of venues. So St. Luke's has a community medical fund that all clinicians can access. And I believe there's a separate fund for children and adults. They provide limited access, but there is some. So if somebody is having an acute crisis, that can be accommodated. And I am not aware of very many times that running out of funds. So that is something that is available for low-income people. Another venue is if there is substance use involved, you can apply for Medicaid. If you get turned down for Medicaid, there is a resource at BPA that provides a lot of funding. Even if you have health insurance, they may fund you because your health insurance either won't cover substance or your deductible is way too high. And that's considered a hardship. So they will provide some financial support until you hit that. That's a thing that we see a lot. Yes, I have health insurance, but I have a $5,000 deductible. Almost the same as not having health insurance for most people, but that is an option for people with some substance issues. Victims Assistance Program. That can be accessed for folks who have been a victim of a crime. There are certain criteria that need to be met, but that is pretty generous in their funding to help kind of restore people to their previous level of functioning before a lot of our domestic violence victims access that fund. And then I just remembered this morning, some of our local churches are pretty generous For example, if anyone is a member of the LDS Church, they really take care of their people and just talk to your bishop about your issue. And, a lot of times they will provide the initial counseling around that and sort of make some suggestions and then provide support for that.
How do you utilize the spiritual resources that people have, their pastors, their priests, imams? How are those helpful or relational to you as a professional?
So unfortunately, I don't have a lot of direct connection with that. What I find in my practice is people who do have a faith practice have usually turned to that first.
Okay.
And perhaps whatever is going on is sort of beyond the scope. But that being said, I'm always glad when they come in because I tell them, guess what? People with a faith practice are always happier than people who don't. So you already have a leg up.
Oh, I think that needs to be restated.
Coping plus.
that needs to be restated. Say that one again.
Okay, so this is a well-researched fact in mental health that people with any kind of faith practice are happier than people who do not have one at all.
Just going to let that one sit there because that's an intriguing, and in my world, what I've seen is that people's faith practice has shifted to what I call naturalism. They love the natural qualities of living in this region, and their faith practice becomes that. But I think you're talking about the more traditional elements of the traditional faith groups and the value that this has to people. And so I appreciate you mentioning that. Are there professionals in this field we should invite to our region? We're rural. That means there's holes. That means you have to fill the holes often.
Right.
Who should we invite to live here so that our mental health is better?
Well, we could really benefit from having a full-time prescriber. As far as I know, we've only really ever had visiting prescribers, and there's a greater need than that can really fill. That being said, it's great that we have people who will come up from usually Boise area and visit with us. I also wonder, this is just sort of a wonder, but because I work with our substance program so much, I do wonder if a sober living community might be viable.
Tell me what that is.
So it's generally a house or some kind of just living arrangement where the agreement is we're all sober here. They tend to have certain rules and share chores and things of that nature. The bottom line rule being no substances, no drinking, no drugs, no nothing. That might benefit some people. I think it would fill the need for some sense of fellowship around that.
I was surprised in our conversation. You let me know of some folks that have recently arrived that are helpful. And I think there might be some value if you were to sort of highlight for us who the new arrivals are that might be valuable for people to know about. Who have you encountered that might be new to some people?
Well, I wanted to put out the names of 3 prescribers that are working with people in McCall. Even now, there's an idea that we don't have anybody, that we can only go to our primary health care doctors who, by the way, do a really good job of that. They really do. Yeah. But sometimes you'll encounter something that just maybe needs the eye of somebody who just does this all the time. This is what they do. So we have a nurse practitioner named Cody Haas from Integrity Mental Health, which I believe is based in Meridian. He is doing in-person visits at our Central Idaho Counseling Office, and will also do telehealth. There is another psychiatric nurse practitioner, Satu Woodland. She is with a clinic called Hope Mental Health, She's only doing telehealth at this time, as far as we know, but has plans that once COVID has died down to her satisfaction, that she will also be coming up to serve people in person. And then St. Luke's has a psychiatrist that comes up. Yay! They have a little bit of a gap for a while. I guess his name is Dr. Michael Walton. And my understanding is he's doing in-person and telehealth as well.
That's a wonderful addition to
It's
our
good
community.
news.
Each and every one of those are
Yeah.
valuable. Thank you. What final thoughts do you have for those needing help?
My thoughts, oh, I wanted to actually read this because I did want to really make it clear. Number one, just be persistent. You might meet with somebody that you just don't feel you click. Try again. It's the hardest time to try again. When you could barely get yourself to do it the first time, to realize this person doesn't get me. But it's the most important time to keep trying. The other bit, we kind of alluded to this earlier. Reach out, even if you don't know exactly what the problem is. Don't fear your situation is too great or too small or too weird or too horrible. And don't worry if you're not a big talker. Please come in.
And I've been sensing an individual sense. Do you also do married counseling when there's more than one person in the
Absolutely.
room? Okay.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so bring those that it's helpful to solve the problem or deal with the conversation. Thank
Yeah.
you. Would you like to restate anything? Live TV is funky. You've now experienced that. Was there anything that you said that you'd like to restate or rethink right now?
No, other than maybe the few moments my brain went offline. I wish I could pull those back, but I don't think so.
Oh,
I don't think so.
thank you. It has been a joy to get to know you and to share with you an awful lot of experience that I think there's a lot of folks out there that will really appreciate. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And so thank you for joining with us tonight. Next week, we're going to continue with two more of our counselors here in the West Central Mountains. And Tracy Jameson and Ashley McCoy will be with us. And they're from Central Idaho Counseling. And so I'll be looking forward to their distinctive take on mental health in our region and how our counselors are working with each and every one of us to improve our area. This is the second of our mental health series, and you'll find the first, which was our conversation with Central District Health, and it will be on our youtube.com site, and that's www.youtube.com/McCall College. That's all one word. And that will give you access to number one and now number two. And we're planning to do two additional ones, though I've been in some conversations with a possible fifth. And I look forward to highlighting that if I can arrange it. There's some folks that I would love to talk to in this field. If you'd like more information, please go to our website, www.mccallcollege.org. And there's information there about the college and about the series that we've been offering. If you'd like to email us, feel free to send something to information@mccallcollege.org. We thank you for watching tonight, and we would love to have you visit with us again next Thursday at 7 p.m. for our next community conversation on YouTube.